The Watchtower Bible and Tract Society, which governs the lives of 8 million Jehovah's Witnesses worldwide, has set a system in place that protects pedophiles. This is not a baseless assertion. To look at the way Watchtower operates, we must take a look at the Shepherd the Flock book, an instruction manual given to the elders, those taking the lead in congregations of Jehovah's Witnesses. This book is kept confidential from the rest of the congregation. Only elders are allowed to read it. In this manual, you will find instructions on how to deal with different types of misconduct an individual Jehovah's Witness might commit, ranging from things like celebrating a holiday to sex before marriage, and everything in between. In the new 2022 edition of Shepherd the Flock book, there's an entire chapter dedicated to child abuse and how to handle child abuse allegations inside the congregation. I provided a link below so you can download the book and read along with me. I'm not making any of this up. I also ask you to please share this video with any friends or family who are still inside this organization. I believe all Jehovah's Witnesses should be aware of all the horrific policies inside this book. Most Jehovah's Witnesses are not even aware of the existence of the book, let alone of the policies inside. Without further ado, let's dive in. Elders should adhere closely to the direction in this chapter when a matter involving child abuse comes to their attention. Doing so will uphold the sanctity of Jehovah's name and contribute toward the safety of minors. Okay, so let's see if the instructions contained in this book contribute toward the safety of minors and upholds, quote-unquote, the sanctity of Jehovah's name. The first problem we find with Watchtower's guidelines is the two-witness rule. This is a policy based on an Old Testament law establishing the need for two witnesses in order to establish wrongdoing. In case the accused does not confess to his crime, then the elders require two individuals to corroborate the accusation. Child abuse usually occurs in private, always lacking a second witness, so applying the two-witness rule to child abuse makes no sense. Keep this rule in mind as we move forward. From the Bible's standpoint, child sexual abuse is a gross sin. Jehovah's Witnesses abhor child sexual abuse. Thus, the congregation will not shield any perpetrator of such repugnant acts from the consequences of his sin. The congregation's handling of an accusation of child sexual abuse is not intended to replace the secular authorities' handling of the matter. Therefore, the victim, her parents, or anyone else who reports such an allegation to the elders should be clearly informed that they have the right to report the matter to secular authorities. Elders do not criticize anyone who chooses to make such a report. Child abuse is a crime. In some jurisdictions, individuals who learn of an allegation of child abuse may be obligated by law to report the allegation to the secular authorities. Then the book cites Romans 13. Here we start setting a precedent on what is to come. This manual tells us that the reason we should report child abuse to the authorities is because the Bible tells us so. If your state requires you to report an allegation, then you should do it out of obedience, not out of concern for children. To ensure that elders comply with child abuse reporting laws, two elders should immediately call the legal department for legal advice when the elders learn of an accusation of child abuse. A call should be made even when both persons involved are minors. The elders should not ask an alleged victim, the accused person, or anyone else to call the legal department on the elder's behalf. The elders should call the legal department even in the following situations. The legal department will provide legal advice based on the facts and the applicable law. As we can read here, elders are instructed not to immediately call the authorities, but to call the legal department for advice. The legal department is a branch of the Jehovah's Witness World Headquarters tasked with handing out legal advice to all congregations within the branch territory. But why call them? In order to comply with mandatory reporting laws. In the United States, these laws change depending on your state. According to the Federal Child Abuse Prevention and Treatment Act, which I provided some links below so you can read, members of the clergy in 28 states are legally obligated to report allegations of abuse to authorities. This means that 32 states do not have mandatory reporting laws by the clergy. This is known as clergy penitent privilege, a legal loophole that can be easily exploited by any church. So, if the elders in a congregation become aware of an abuse allegation, they have to call the legal department first to receive instructions. If their state has mandatory reporting laws, the elders are instructed to contact the authorities. If no laws exist, nowhere in this book are elders urged to contact the authorities. The abuse is then handled internally behind closed doors, swept under the rug. Paragraph 4 states that victims should be made aware of their legal right to contact the authorities. But why are the elders not allowed to take the initiative? If their goal is to protect children, why not mandate elders to contact the authorities immediately? What if the victims feel intimidated to report? This is negligent behavior that leaves the door open for a pedophile to evade justice. By the time two elders come together and call the legal department, the alleged abuser might have caused more damage to other children. The same negligent approach is also taken if an adult is caught involved with the production of child pornography or sexting with a minor. It's not to call the authorities first, call the legal department. Although viewing child pornography is not considered to be child sexual abuse from a congregation standpoint, it is still a serious violation of Jehovah's standards. A person involved in viewing child pornography should be strongly counseled. Depending on the frequency and the extent of his viewing, he could be subject to congregation judicial action. It's clear as day. An individual who is involved with the production of child pornography might be reported if the legal department advises so. But an individual who confesses to only viewing child pornography should only be strongly counseled. Viewing child pornography is not considered child abuse by the Watchtower organization. In fact, if we follow the link to chapter 13, Watchtower groups child pornography with all other sorts of sexual acts, combining both legal and illegal content under the banner abhorrent. Since Watchtower handles these matters from a religious point of view, homosexual acts between two consenting adults are taken with the same seriousness as child pornography. They're not the same thing. One is explicit content allowed under federal law, the other is a horrific crime, both against the children and the state. The federal government of the United States holds that viewing child pornography is a crime, both at the federal and state level. So yes, Watchtower, viewing child pornography is child abuse. The person who consumes this pornography is contributing to its demand, even if they are not directly involved in producing it. This religion is not only negligent, but incredibly dangerous to children. Individuals who look at child pornography belong in prison and in the sex offender registry, not in congregations full of kids. If wrongdoing is established and the wrongdoer is not repentant, he should be disfellowshipped. On the other hand, if the wrongdoer is repentant and is reproved, the reproof should be announced to the congregation at the next midweek meeting. This announcement would serve as a protection for the congregation. Victims of child sexual abuse are not handled judicially. If the elders become convinced that an individual is guilty of child abuse, they will form a judicial committee. Remember, a judicial committee is basically 3 elders deciding if a person is guilty of sin or not, and how to discipline them in the congregation. Remember the 2-witness rule that we talked about earlier? Well, the elders need a confession from the accused or an additional witness that saw the abuse in order to establish wrongdoing. If they don't have any of these, they cannot form a judicial committee. So if the abuser lives in a state which does not have mandatory reporting and the victim has not contacted the authorities on their own, the pedophile can basically avoid justice. These legal loopholes allow a pedophile the chance to avoid legal consequences for his actions, and even worse, remain in the congregation where the abuse had taken place. Even if the abuser confesses his sin, or there was by any chance 2 witnesses to the abuse, and the judicial committee is formed, all the abuser has to do now is appear repentant of his actions before the elders. The abuser is then reproved, that is, not allowed to hold congregation privileges for some time. This reproof is announced to the congregation, but this crime is not specified. Everyone else in the congregation might remain unaware of the abuse. If a judicial committee is formed and the abuser is not deemed repentant by the elders, he will be disfellowshipped, that is, cut off from the congregation. The abuser is still allowed to attend church services, but for some time is not allowed to speak to any of its members. He can later apply to be reinstated, accepted back into the congregation. In such cases, direction from the service department to the elders will include restrictions imposed on the individual's activities within the congregation and on his participation in the field ministry. The elders will also be directed to caution the individual never to be alone with a minor, not to cultivate friendships with minors, not to display affection for minors, and so forth. The service department will direct the elders to inform family heads of minors within the congregation of the need to monitor their children's interactions with the individual. The elders would take this step only if directed to do so by the service department. So let's say the abuser has been reproved. He is still allowed to talk to everyone in the congregation. He is simply counseled to not be unsupervised around children. Parents will be made aware of the pedophile among them only if the service department sees fit. When does the service department see fit to warn parents of this dangerous individual? There's no way of knowing. Even more dangerous, if this pedophile is not reported to the authorities, he remains a threat to those outside the congregation. If elders are instructed to warn parents only if the service department sees fit, they have no incentive to tell the outside community about the child abuser. So these policies create a dangerous environment not only inside the congregation, but in the outside community as well. This last sentence is also deeply disturbing. If the elders determine a minor was a willing participant, they might form a judicial committee for them as well, with threat of punishment. A minor is never a willing participant. Under federal law, it is illegal for an adult to engage in relations with a minor, even if the minor is consenting. This is called statutory rape. A minor who engaged in relations with an adult and later realized this is illegal might be afraid to ask for help from the elders out of fear of punishment. Their fears would not be unjustified, as this sentence tells us. Watchtower instructs the elders to investigate and punish minors who admitted to quote-unquote consensual relations with an adult. This is sickening on every level. I believe I have shown you beyond a shadow of a doubt that the policies Watchtower has in place for its followers are dangerous to children and the community as a whole. These policies have had a devastating effect on congregations. In Australia alone, authorities revealed the existence of 1,006 abuse allegations. Not one of these was reported to the authorities. Recently in Pennsylvania, 4 Jehovah's Witness men were charged with the abuse of 19 children. As time passes, more and more of these cases come to light, showcasing just how many lives have been destroyed under these policies. All of these issues could be avoided only if Watchtower would update their horrific guidelines and mandate elders to always report abuse allegations to the authorities, regardless of local mandatory reporting laws. This is not too difficult of a thing to implement. Watchtower already instructs mandatory reporting in case of church vandalism. In that case, authorities should be contacted immediately. Hypocrites. Why not extend this direction to abuse allegations? Watchtower cares more about their property than the welfare of their children. So they have utterly failed in one of their 2 priorities, which we mentioned in the beginning, contributing towards the safety of minors. They have also failed in upholding the sanctity of Jehovah's name. By allowing pedophiles to evade justice, Watchtower opens itself to lawsuits by the victims. These lawsuits reach the news media, and this ends up ruining the reputation of Jehovah's Witnesses and the God they worship. Watchtower has failed on all fronts, and now it is up to us to bring their abuses to light. This problem is not local, it's not a few bad apples, it's not only a few individuals who happen to be bad. This problem is systemic. It's written into Watchtower's own policies. It runs from the top to the bottom. This organization has set forward regulations that allows for child abuse at an industrial level. Please, share this video with anyone who might need it. If you are a Jehovah's Witness watching, please, I urge you to read the guidelines for yourself so you can confirm I'm telling you the truth. Thank you for joining me in this video today. Take care, guys.